So Alistair Croll, everyone.
All right. How you guys doing? My name's Alistair. We just published Complete Web Monitoring. We're going to be talking about it this afternoon. That's called foreshadowing. I actually wanted to talk about something rather different here. The gist of the book is that you need to look at performance, availability, all kinds of other things together to get a complete understanding of your site. And that includes what's happening in communities, what's happening with web analytics. And I want to talk about one important thing we've seen here, and this goes really well with the last two presenters. On the one hand, we just talked about cloud computing. We just talked about performance and why performance drives revenue. And I wanted to talk about how all these things converge, because there are three important changes happening right now to web operations. Elastic computing and the ability to scale up and down. Web performance, which we just talked a lot about and contributes to revenue. And then analytics, which shows us how much money we're making online. Obviously, a key attribute of clouds like Mossos and others is elasticity. And if you have been in IT, the equation you've lived by for the last few years is this one. And you may argue whether or not this is always the case, and there are certainly tweaks, but on a very macro level, the delay in seconds that your users experience is related to how much traffic you've got and how much capacity you can throw at it. And when you get traffic spikes, things slow down, and when you have more capacity, things get faster. In fact, if you put this together on a percentile graph, you probably get a chart that looks something like this, whereas the requests per second across the bottom increase, the latency of the site at a certain percentile goes up, and you have a bad experience. And of course, if you want to fix that, you add some machines and the latency changes. This shouldn't be news to anybody who was watching the last few sessions. But now let's look at this formula again, because your job as someone in web operations was to tweak the number of machines to achieve a level of performance that was acceptable to your organization. And with elastic computing, that capacity becomes infinite. So the chart looks very different. You tell the cloud, hey, don't let people wait more than 1 second. And when that performance degrades below a certain threshold, throw resources at it. And again, I'm talking at a very macro level. That may be dynamically provision resources on a CDN. It may be add instances, whatever that thing is. But the bottom line is that now you're tweaking the knob for user experience, and the amount of resources, and therefore your bill at the end of the month changes. So the fundamental equation we've had to deal with as web operations professionals for the last 20 years is changing. Now that performance affects revenue, we're all slightly sharper looking and better dressed. And you can chart this stuff over time. You can say, here's my performance over the week, and here's the conversions on my website using analytics over the week. If you want to get really detailed, you can look at individual users and say, based on the page load time that user experienced, what kind of performance did they get? And this is where it gets really wrinkly, because ultimately this can tell you the performance level you need to target for your organization. So let's make some outrageous assumptions that you can yell at me about over lunch. If I have a website whose ideal perfect conversion rate is 10%, best I could do is 10% of my visitors buy something, and they all buy $50. Again, this is a philosophical experiment. Let's say that we lose 1% of our conversions every time the site gets 100 milliseconds slower. And this number is different, but you can fit it to a regression curve of your own making based on all the stuff we've seen this morning with that convergence of elasticity, analytics, and performance. And let's say I have 100,000 visitors in a certain time period. Now this last one's the interesting one. What is the cost to service a visitor in under a second? Let's call that the cost per visitor second. It's a metric that doesn't exist today. But when we get to elastic capacity, whether that's instances with Amazon Web Services that we're spinning up dynamically, or it's raw resources like a Google App Engine Cloud, there's going to be some cost per visitor second to service and provide utility computing to users. In a perfect utility world, incremental revenue from performance happens. The better you get, the more your performance drives conversions. And there's a cost, obviously, going towards infinity when that performance gets achieved. And if you put this into a grid, and I'm not going to go through the math, but something ridiculously oversimplified that tries to put those assumptions I just showed you into a chart, what you wind up with is this thing that says, hey, as performance gets worse, our revenues drop. And as performance costs more to deliver, our costs go up. And there's some sweet spot, some magic spot here that tells you where those fit. And yeah, this is kind of nonsense. We're talking 3 or 4 years out. But as we move towards elastic computing, linking the revenue we can achieve to the capacity we can afford is going to become a fundamental job of web operators. I think an IT system's effectiveness is going to be judged by metrics like this cost per visitor second. What kind of cost per visitor second can your overall infrastructure deliver? And what's interesting about this is that there are no management tools that can do this today, that can automatically balance the cost of capacity with the revenue generated by that performance level so that capacity can deliver that in near real time. And I think that's a fundamental shift in the way we build and manage IT systems, and it's going to lead to a whole bunch of new operational tools that consolidate performance, web analytics revenue, and the elastic pricing that you're getting from one or more clouds. So you can yell at me at lunch. It's just a thought to throw out there over our lunchtime conversation. Thank you.